Penguin Random House Audio presents The Lives of Lucian Freud, Volume 2, Fame, 1968 to 2011, by William Feaver. Read for you by Jonathan Keeble.
Preface. Notebook entry for Wednesday, the 28th of November, 1973, the day I began to get to know Lucian Freud. A bed in each room, empty canvases ready. A painting, nude, sprawled, leg cocked across, painting stool edging into the bottom of the picture. The front room has a brass bedstead, tables covered with letters, telegrams, the listener, paint tubes bent and worried. A small, surprisingly bright palette. Lucian talked, I remember, about how early on he had taken to showing up at the Ritz bar and other wartime haunts in a fez and postman's trousers. That was then. And now, with his 50th birthday in prospect and a retrospective to follow, such stunts were blips in a distant past. Things were getting ever more serious in terms of ambition. Paintings accomplished, and those he hoped might yet be done. His mid-career show was an occasion for taking stock, an Arts Council man had told him, without going as far as to explain that it was in fact a stopgap. Somebody else's proposed exhibition had fallen through, hence this sudden late addition to the Hayward Gallery winter schedule. Freud wasn't bothered about being second choice, since he had never been associated with any innovative tendency, and thus had no date-stamped reputation to lose. He wasn't even as celebrated an anomaly as his friend Francis Bacon. To be exceptional was good enough. The Sunday Times magazine hadn't specified what sort of article I should produce to coincide with the opening of the exhibition, but it had been put to me that an arresting character study was needed, as revelatory as I could make it. Freud's life and works had become wreathed in rumour. Waiting in that cluttered upstairs room in Maida Vale while he changed for lunch, discarding the paint-smeared trousers, I began jotting down potential quotes and observations. Where to start? Briefly, Lucian Michael Freud, born in Berlin on the 8th of December 1922, the second middle son of Ernst Freud, architect and youngest son of Sigmund Freud, was named after his mother, Lucy Brasch. In September 1933, not long after the Nazis had seized power, the family moved to England, where in successive schools, Lucian became fluent in English, but evasive when faced with academic demands and institutional procedures. A term or two at the Central School of Art was followed by spells at the more congenial East Anglian School of Painting and Drawing, interrupted by 3 traumatic months, March to May 1941, during which he served incompetently as an ordinary seaman in 2 North Atlantic convoys, Nova Scotia and back. Invalided out and exempted from conscription, he swung into an opportunistic way of life in London. The emblematic centrepiece of his first one-man show in 1944 was the Painter's Room, featuring a red-striped zebra head, a gift from his femme fatale Lorna Wishart, intruding upon a space furnished with attributes: sofa, scarf, top hat, and scruffy palm. Post-war, Freud made his way as soon as he could to Paris, then in the autumn of 1946 to Greece, where he spent several months with fellow painter John Craxton on the Isle of Poros. Soon afterwards, having returned to London, he became involved with Kitty Garman, daughter of Jacob Epstein and niece of Lorna Wishart, whom he married in 1948. She sat for Girl with Roses, 1947–48, and, more resignedly, as Girl with a White Dog, 1950–51. Freud did not take to domesticity. His interior in Paddington, 1951, featuring a resentful young man squaring up to the even more unkempt palm in its alien setting, the Painter's Room in Delamere Terrace, London W2, secured an Arts Council Festival of Britain Purchase Prize. Divorce was followed by marriage to Caroline Blackwood in December 1953. The subsequent Hotel Bedroom, 1954, was a disaffected view of the relationship, which formally ended in 1957. Emboldened paintings, making the paint do what you want it to do, were more than a match for the distractions, gambling, betting, and amorous pursuits of the 60s, a period in which the artist achieved a degree of accomplishment bordering on virtuosity. Living still, squatting virtually, in various council properties scheduled for demolition, he fitted phenomenal stretches of activity into each day. A compartmented life in which sittings had unquestionable priority. He aimed throughout, he said, for greater ruthlessness. As his celebrity swelled, he became increasingly conscious of time running out. This second volume begins when Freud had just over 40 years of studio life ahead of him. Years that, in terms of ambition and relentless application, were to prove extraordinarily productive. It combines his words and my recollections, together with the reminiscences of many others whose relationships with him differed widely. Sometimes, when he stepped back to take a fresh look at a painting as it neared what could be declared completion, he would murmur, as though taunting himself, "How far can you go?" Initially, this book was to have been a brief account of Freud the artist, but in the late 1990s, as the tapes accumulated and reminiscences flowed, we agreed that what Lucian had taken to referring to as the first funny art book was outgrowing its prospectus. So it was shelved for the time being, Lucian half-heartedly assuring me that he would have no objection to a novel appearing once he was dead. Working with him on a number of exhibitions made the oeuvre ever more familiar to me, and we went on talking, primarily on the phone, almost daily. The notes I took from the countless conversations, "How old am I now?" he would ask me, or, less specifically, "How goes it?" are the chief source of these 2 volumes of biography. Part 1. Jacquetta Elliott, The Death of Ernst Freud, Leaving the Marlborough for James Kirkman, 1968 to 1981. Chapter 1. The point is the forehead. British Vogue's 50th anniversary issue for October 1966 lauded the new plastic age and featured prominently the young Lady Elliott, looking not best pleased at being photographed by the pushy David Bailey as a Janus face, whose daytime look, boyish hairdo and a 9-guinea golden-yellow sweater, flips into nightlife glamourpuss. Transformed by Pablo the hairdresser into a modern Cleopatra, he uses a long black wig, fine black lashes and liner painted as lashes on the lower lid. Later to pose intimately, dedicatedly so for Lucian Freud, Jacquetta Elliott, daughter of the wartime British ambassador to Egypt, Sir Miles Lamson, was a friend of Penelope Cuthbertson, whom she replaced as his prime sitter. "I didn't know her well in the first few months," Freud said. "She was 24, had married pretty young. Her father was the person who kicked Farouk out of Egypt, that is, was overseer of King Farouk's abdication. She seemed brilliant and wrote marvellous poems and was friendly with people." He met her shortly before his 1968 Marlborough show, at a time when, he rather felt, his relationship with Penelope Cuthbertson was becoming irksome. "I was just doing what I wanted. It didn't seem like a complicated transition at the time. They were all in a set. I went down to stay at Perry's." Perry was Jacquetta's husband, Peregrine Elliott, later 10th Earl of St. Germans, who lived at Port Elliott, a great Gothic mansion in Cornwall. "It was a very odd place. Sleepy atmosphere, land below sea level, wine cellar by John Soane. I was terribly impressed. In the morning the butler came in and lit the fire quietly and said what the weather was like, and they ate off solid silver plates, even shepherd's pie." Most impressive, most pleasurable, was Jacquetta, whom he pursued with letters, several a day, many never sent, and trunk calls to Cornwall. "You know, when I get angry, it's only from waiting and waiting." He stood in the rain outside their London house in Chepstow Place 2 nights running, and then shinned up a wonky drainpipe to reach her balcony, scrabbling until, as she said, she relented. "Finally, I had to say, 'This is ridiculous. Okay. Better come in and have coffee or something and get dry.' That was very typical of him, to focus on his prey. I remember him watching me at parties. Once he came to Cornwall when Perry was away, and I was having a house party. He arrived, and I was horrified. 'You must go,' I said. He said, "I've come all this way."
Sample complete. Ready to continue?